Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. If I start by saying that all eyes of the international community are set on Pakistan at this point in time as we speak, it won't be wrong because Pakistan has been in the grip of a natural calamity of a huge proportion. And let's take a little bit of quick stock of the stats. 1/3 of Pakistan has been affected because of the devastating floods. 1/10 of the country is underwater. 3 times more rain across the country have been recorded this time around during this summer. The death toll is nearing around 1,600. Now, 33 million people have been affected because of these massive floods. 1.7 million houses have been destroyed, and the assessed damages by the National Flood Response Coordination Center have been $40 billion. Now, foods crop loss, that is estimated to be $2.3 billion. And especially at a time of the global food price hike, and the livestock which have been swept away because of these massive floods are estimated to be around 800,000. That is exactly going to be the focus of Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's address to the August gathering of the United Nations General Assembly. The 77th session is underway in New York, and he is going to apprise the international community about the devastation that has been caused by these massive floods and kind of the anguish and the pain the Pakistani people had to go through because of the massive downpours. Not only this, we've seen UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres paying a solidarity visit to Pakistan and being the eyewitness of the scale and the proportion of the damage and the destruction and the devastation because of these floods, especially in the southern provinces of Sindh and Balochistan. Now, there has been an urgent appeal by him for the debt restructuring, and he has also urged the international financial institutions to look into the matter and put in place those mechanisms which could help countries like Pakistan, which are under stress. Not only this, world leaders have also urged the international community, including US President Joe Biden. He has made a fervent appeal to the international community to come to the fore and help Pakistan to deal with these massive floods. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif have had a number of meetings on the sidelines of this 77th session of the United Nations General Assembly, and he has had meetings with the World Bank President as well as the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund. Our production team has prepared a report. Let's watch this report and then we'll delve deeper into various aspects of this, what the international community can do Pakistan, and how far Pakistan has sensitized the international community about the climate change and its impacts on Pakistan.
Pakistan's plight in the realm of unprecedented floods and torrential rains and the resultant magnanimous destruction in terms of lives and material losses is echoing in the speeches of the world leaders in the 77th United Nations General Assembly session. In this regard, United States President Joe Biden on Wednesday made a fervent call for extending help to Pakistan, where floods have caused huge devastation, in his speech to the UNGA. United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken met Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif at the United Nations General Assembly, expressed sympathy for the flood victims, and assured that the United States will stand with Pakistan at this difficult time. Meanwhile, President of United Nations General Assembly expressed his complete sympathy, solidarity and cooperation with Pakistan in wake of the floods in the country. In a meeting with Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif on the sidelines of the 77th session of the UNGA in New York, he noted that Pakistan is not responsible for this disaster and it needs world support. On the other hand, President of World Bank David R. Malpass met with Prime Minister on the sidelines of 77th session of UNGA and stressed that Pakistan should be prioritized for reconstruction through the collective support of the international community. He also expressed the World Bank Group's willingness to help Pakistan in its reconstruction and rehabilitation efforts. He pledged to immediately redisburse $850 million to help Pakistan in flood relief efforts. Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari has called for a Green Marshall Plan to assist and support the climate vulnerable countries while addressing a closed-door leaders roundtable on COP27 in New York. He highlighted the devastation caused by the recent climate-induced floods in Pakistan. The Foreign Minister stressed the need for collective and urgent action to build back better in a greener and climate-resilient manner. Meanwhile, in his recent tweet, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said that his discussions with top officials of IMF and World Bank in New York have focused on making resources available within our existing programs for post-flood reconstruction.
You just watched the report. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is in New York and he'll be addressing the August gathering of the United Nations General Assembly, accompanied by a high-level delegation, including the Foreign Minister, Mr. Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, and he has urged the international community to go for a Green Marshall Plan. At the same time, Prime Minister had the meeting with World Bank President, who has pledged around $850 million to be reimbursed for the flood-affected people, for the relief and the rehabilitation. Let's talk about how successful Pakistani authorities have been so far in order to sensitize the international community about the devastation caused because of the climatic changes in Pakistan. We are honored to have been joined in the studio by Dr. Tughral Yamin. Thank you very much for being on the show. We're really honored.
Thank you.
And we are also being joined on Skype from South Africa by Mr. Najm Saqib, who is a former ambassador. Mr. Saqib, thank you very much for your time, also for being on Views on News. Let's begin the discussion with you, Mr. Yamin. How successful do you think Pakistan has been so far in order to sensitize the international community that, look, Pakistan is contributing less than 1% of the greenhouse carbon emissions, yet it is bearing the brunt of the climate change, as can be witnessed in the form of the devastating floods that we recently had?
Tehami sahab, unfortunately, there are double standards in this world. Everybody knows Pakistan is not responsible for climate change, yet we are not getting the kind of aid or funds that we deserve. This is bad. Everybody knows that Joe Biden has publicly spoken about it from the forum of General Assembly. Antonio Guterres has said Pakistan is drowning not only underwater but also in debt. So he has been here. Angelina Jolie is here. People know it. Mr. Sharif has talked with his French counterpart, President Macron, about what kind of devastation is Pakistan suffering. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. But unfortunately, there is a aid fatigue in the world. They consider Pakistan perpetually struggling, asking for aid for one reason or the other. And although this is a very genuine reason that we are asking for aid, but I don't expect a lot of aid coming in. There are reasons for it. The West in particular is riveted towards the crisis in Ukraine, and they are also alarmed by the recent statement by Mr. Putin in which he has ordered a partial mobilization of people. They're sending in billions of dollars to arm Ukraine to fight Russia, but they're not willing to send more than a few measly millions to Pakistan. They know it. They know it. Pakistan is drowning. There's no doubt about it.
There was a clear-cut statement by UN Secretary
Yeah,
General.
he was very.
It's not the matter of generosity. It's a matter of
He was
justice.
very emphatic. He was very emphatic. We have been telling people, but that is the problem. People know it, but yet they are not willing to pay heed to a genuine human catastrophe, which is still unfolding in Pakistan. It has not stopped. Now there will be disease, and there's going to be drought and other related consequences of this massive, monstrous biblical floodings which has wreaked havoc in Pakistan.
Right. Let's go to Mr. Saqib. Mr. Saqib, what are your expectations as Dr. Tughral Yamin is not that much hopeful that the international community is going to come to help Pakistan after these biblical floods. But interestingly, we see that it was because of the industrialized nations that Pakistan is bearing the brunt of this climate change.
Thank you very much, Jawad. I agree with the assessment that the expectations of Pakistan are not being met, actually. But I would like to make here a very clear distinction between relationships which are, among or between the human beings and the nation states. There is a huge difference between relationships between nation states when you talk about the United Nations or even World Bank and IMF. Your first question was a very pertinent question, that have we been able to actually sensitize uh, the real issue, the huge catastrophic situation in Pakistan? It has got twofold, the answer is twofold. One is that the enormity of the calamity was so much that not a junior or a middle level officer of the United Nations, but the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres himself visited Pakistan. It does not happen, in a normal way. So, if the United States, if the United Nations, if all the European countries, if the entire world, barring a few very conspicuous, examples like India and a few other countries, I think the government of Pakistan, led by Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, and ably supported by the Foreign Office, the Foreign Minister, we have already been able to sensitize the entire world about the contours and the extent and nature of this catastrophic situation that Pakistan is going through. So this is number one. Number two is that expecting people or the other nation states to just come and leave everything aside. Every country has its own issues, the dynamics, the problems. So we should not expect the moon from the United Nations. But I can assure you, after having served in the Foreign Office and as an ambassador for 35 years in international relations, I can assure you that the response so far received, not only in the context of flood, but extra investments and promises of, let's say, not only money, but in kind also. It has been unprecedented. So I'm very happy, and let's give the, some credit to the Foreign Office and all those ambassadors and, consul generals, the heads of mission in more than 100 missions, who were immediately asked to meet at the highest possible level, in their host countries and sensitize them with facts and figures. These days, you can't say, you can't get aid or can't get attention of the world merely on well-drafted speeches. You need to come up with facts and figures. And I'm very happy to tell you and millions of your viewers that Pakistan has been ably, very nicely, very professionally able to sensitize the world that this is a problem. And the last bit of it, my response would be that although Pakistan is affected, but the kind of response that we have got, I think the world has already accepted that it is an international problem. And as far as the discussion on climate change and less than 1% our contribution, there is a contradiction which I would like to highlight here. And that is that those countries who are actually able to help Pakistan in going through this calamity or address this situation are the ones who are actually the culprits of this climate change and this.
That, Mr. Saqib, that is exactly the point. Now, when you talk about Pakistani authorities sensitizing the international community about the catastrophe Pakistan is faced with, and in return, you've said that we have got an unprecedented response as well. But the assessment shows that the overall losses could touch a neck-breaking amount of $40 billion. Do you think Pakistan can alone, or with the kind of help in cash or kind we are receiving, that proportion would be met in future?
That is a very good question. Look, Jawad, if you are talking about, dealing with this catastrophic situation through the international community or the aid coming from abroad, I think that would not be fair with the international relations that we have been living and the realpolitik that we are looking at it. For instance, India is there. Which we saw in SCO, India was there. India is also there in the United Nations, and it would be, quite clearly a hurdle between the actual addressing of the situation and the politics which New Delhi has been professing and propagating for the last at least 3-4 years. Now, coming to your question, it is not enough. Why? Because it is still counting. 14 billion, 15 billion dollar is nothing. Look at the colossal loss that we have suffered, and we are still counting. But the good news is that the world has taken a serious cognizance of the fact. And the
world has taken a serious cognizance of this fact. Mr. Saqib, please hold your thought. Dr. Yamin, what's your take? Like the kind of the proportion and the scale of the damage, and as Mr. Saqib alluded to, the fact that the response by the international community so far in cash and kind has been phenomenal. So do you think they will continue to do so? And the kind of assessment that we have made initially, it's around $40 billion of damages. Do you think they would continue to support Pakistan in the times to come also?
You need a frank and candid answer.
Of course, please go ahead.
No. No, because the world does not live in one crisis alone. There are fresh crises which will strike the world. One which is about to blow up is in Ukraine.
Why not? Why not?
Why?
Because this is the matter that doesn't affect Pakistan. This time around,
Why, Mr. Tehami? Why? What have they got to do with Pakistan? Pakistan is
because Pakistan has been helping them out in all endeavors, whether it be war on terror,
doesn't matter at all. Look, Mr. Tehami, world is a very callous place. And
like for example, climate, nature is also very ruthless at times, because it's not affecting Pakistan this time around. It could hit any other developed country at the same time.
Nobody's bothered, for God's sake. Let's be very clear in our minds. Yes, the world knows it, but world will not help you to the extent that you want them to help you. No, they will not, because they have other issues, pressing issues at hand. You go to Europe, you go to North America, they do not talk about Pakistan. They will
talk about climate change.
Look, Mr. Tamil, let me complete. They will just talk about Ukraine. You talk to any European or any North American, he will just talk about Ukraine. He is not worried what is happening in Kashmir or Palestine or in Pakistan. They are not bothered. What you ought to do, or I ought to do, we ought to tighten our own belts. We ought to declare an emergency in Pakistan. We cannot simply live the way we are living. You want to say something?
Let me take the point of Mr. Saqib on this one.
Yeah, please do that.
It's very bluntly said by Dr. Yamin. Mr. Saqib, what's your take on this? He's not that very much hopeful that the entire world community would be thinking about Pakistan, because most of the time they're talking about other issues, whether it comes to Kashmir or the climatic effects in Pakistan. They are least bothered, because the way this world works, as per Dr. Yamin, it's callous.
There is a difference between being pragmatic and being pessimistic. The thing is that you are dealing with international community. International community, the driving force is never emotionalism. You cannot run your foreign policy on emotions alone. That we are in trouble, why the help is not coming from the world, and why the culprits of climate change, they are not helping us. This is not a stage of college or university debating society. We are talking about serious issues. We have to see the context. And let me clarify the context here. The context is that the world, although is having lots and lots of bilateral problems, individual problems, regional problems, international problems, but the fact that Pakistan has been able to sensitize the issue of floods and climate change under these extremely sensitive and serious, circumstances, you have to give the credit to the government of Pakistan. This is number one. Number two, expecting the moon from the world, that they never talked about Kashmir, that they never, solved the Palestinian issue. Let me, quote a couple of examples where the world has been oblivious of the fact. For instance, there is a problem of Gibraltar between Spain and UK. Has the world been, able to address that? There is a problem between Azerbaijan and Armenia in the heart of Europe, Nagorno-Karabakh. What has happened there? There is a proper, full-fledged war is going on between Russia and Ukraine. What has, West done or the world done about this? And for that matter, has Pakistan done anything about the Ukraine war? So you have to be, if you have to be pragmatic, then you have to see the, much can be said on both sides of the picture. But the good news is, Jawad, the good news is that whenever there was an international calamity anywhere in the world, Pakistan, Islamabad would be in the forefront to go and help. We are not talking about Afghanistan. We are not talking about Ukraine and the realpolitik and, the world conflicts and territories and all that. We are talking about a human catastrophe. And in that, the human beings of whichever country are you from. So the good news is that they have taken cognizance, they have promised money. Now, to come up to my expectation or Dr. Saab's expectation.
Right. Right, Mr. Saqib, your point is well taken.
Yeah.
We are joined by another participant in the show. Let's include him also, Dr. Adil Sultan, Dean, Head of Department of Strategic Studies, Air University. Dr. Sultan, thank you very much for being on our show today. So we've been having the discussion regarding how successful Pakistani authorities been in sensitizing the international community about the extreme effects of climate change.
Yeah, thank you, Najm Saab, for having me. I think the debate, the comments that I heard, we are not adequately understanding what the issue is. We are in an existential crisis. Our existence is at stake, and we are talking about whether the world has been enough sensitized or not. I don't think so. You have to see this in a background, in a context. We had a similar kind of a catastrophe in 2010, and we asked for the international community and how much international community helped and what we did for ourselves. Track record is there. So I think we have to see this. We should not be expecting too much from the international community.
Why shouldn't, Dr. Sultan, why shouldn't Pakistan be expecting from the international community? Because it's been clearly said and reiterated by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who has been eyewitness of the devastation caused here because of climate change in Pakistan, not being the contributor in the greenhouse gas emissions, less than 1%, yet bearing the brunt. So why Pakistan shouldn't expect more from the international community, especially the developed and industrialized nations?
I agree with this, but this threat is not new. It didn't appear this year. People who are concerned about climate change, who are knowledgeable, they have been talking about for the last many, many years, couple of decades, that this is going to happen. And let me tell you, this is going to be the future of the world. But still, the dynamics.
No, Dr. Sultan, again, beg your pardon. When you say that it's going to be the future of the world also, so it's not specific to Pakistan only. It's related to humanity overall. If this time around, this summer, Pakistan has been badly hit, it could be some other country. This time around, we have seen record heat waves in Europe as well. Certain states of the US also been hit by massive floods. So it's not only about Pakistan. Climate change is not Pakistan's issue. It is the existential threat for the entire humanity on this planet.
I think all countries agree on this, but we have to see the track record. How many countries have acted upon this kind of commitment that they made at the Conference of Parties and other international forums? It's more of a talk. Major powers, the industrialized one, they are not going to cut down on the emissions. We had seen the disagreements. We have seen some of our neighbors, the biggest polluters. So they will continue to do. They make these commitments, and in reality, because they are not directly affected for now, they are not likely to work on this with all seriousness, because it's Pakistan which has been affected. So there is a difference we have to understand, and I'm saying it in the context of the track record, what the commitments they make, what the obligations they take in various conventions, agreements at international bodies. But how much that actually translates into policy or that is a question that we have to see. So if nothing has happened over the past many years, there's less likely that probably anything would happen now also.
Right, Dr. Sultan, please stay with us. Let's talk to Mr. Saqib. Mr. Saqib, you seem to be very hopeful, and since you say that so far the response by the international community has been phenomenal. Now, when Secretary General United Nations Antonio Guterres says of putting in place a mechanism for debt restructuring or debt suspension, now, let's talk about Pakistan's economy in particular. When the economy was already under pressure, just not because of the COVID-19 pandemic, because of the other fiscal policies as well. This time around, the external debt has increased manifold. It's around, Pakistan had to pay $15.07 billion as an external debt servicing in fiscal year 2022 compared to 13.42 billion in fiscal year 21. So could there be any mechanism if they can't provide provide Pakistan with huge amount of money directly? There could be a possibility that they could either think of waiving off these debts completely or giving some sort of a window to Pakistan to have a little bit of ease.
You know, what I'm worried about is, besides this flood, which is causing great havoc to my country and people have been, sacrificing their lives, we are, dealing with this catastrophe internally also, and we are expecting more help and assistance, both cash and kind. One of the fringe benefits of this is, for instance, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's meeting with the IMF and World Bank leaders. In normal circumstances, in any UNGA session, it would not be, usual or customary that a prime minister of a country like Pakistan is meeting these two leaders, which are actually holding the entire money of the world and the funding and all that. One of the fringe benefits is that if the President of the United States and the United Nations Secretary General, they say that they were already, under great debt problems, and these floods have created even additional problems as far as economy is concerned. So it is a good news for us. I'm not, saying all this because I am a, true Pakistani and I am for this government which is running the show in Islamabad. I'm talking as a diplomat, and I have seen responses of the world. They just say, okay, we are looking into it. The talks were substantive, and we will see that how best we can help Pakistan. This would have been the normal.
Right, Mr. Saqib, your point is well taken. Let's take the view of Dr. Yamin on this. Dr. Yamin, do you think, as Mr. Saqib has alluded to the fact that it's not normal for any country's prime minister to have a meeting with the leaders of IMF and the World Bank, so it's a good news they are considering of giving a window to Pakistan?
Unless something comes in writing, what can I say? Look, Mr. Tehami, we have done a good job sensitizing the world, no doubt about it, but the world's response has been poor and weak, and we have to blame ourselves for many of the things. We are struck by floods on a regular basis. Every 5 or 10 years, we suffer from floods, and we have not taken necessary measures to prevent floods. Okay, we have no measures to mitigate flood disasters.
For that, you need money. The sustainable.
You need some planning, my dear. The planning is missing. Our political leaders are busy fighting each other all the time. Those in power want to remain in power. Those out of power want to remove the people in power. That is what we are doing. Policies are missing. 2010, we suffered from a massive flood. Mr. Sharif, our current Prime Minister, was then the Chief Minister of Punjab. Yes, he was all over the news, did some good job as well. But did we take any long-term measures? We did not.
So do you think that can be done just by the will of the political authority, or should the intelligentsia or the academia or the universities or the scholars, the scientists in the country should also come to the fore and contribute to that? Because we lack in that field also.
Listen to me. Policy planning is the job of the government, okay? Oh,
but sustainable solutions.
Listen to me. If they call me, I will go. I will give my inputs. But it is the government who makes the policy. Any government, X, Y, Z. I'm not talking about which party is in power. Any party which is in power is supposed to have long-term measures, and they have to be implemented. If the canals have to be brick-lined, or for example, this time you breached the canals, you cut the Indus Highway. You know, this is something which you are supposed to prepare for. I was in the military for 36 years, and we were the first responders every time. We knew where the breach had to be made. But are you prepared to make those breaches? Listen to me. Do you tell the people that if you are living next to Manchar Lake, you will be drowned? If you are living next to UBDC, you will drown. We do not do that. Floods, when they come, advance warnings must be sent. The weather patterns are changing. The Met Office should have predicted that this kind of thing is going to happen. There is a pattern to the floods.
Do you think such type of warnings work in beforehand when there is a situation of flash floods, because they don't give you ample time to respond and evacuate?
Look, the first responders, the district administration, they have to do their work, which is not done. We are always in a knee-jerk reaction. I'm telling you from practical experience. Every time a flood would come, we would go out even before the district administration would call us. But it is the job of the district administration to give warnings and tell the people to evacuate. It was not done. So many people. I know people cling to their livestock. They would climb the highest tree in the village and would not leave. They would say, "I'm not leaving. I will not leave with my goat or my camel or my cow." So
because there is a lot of emotional attachment to that.
So what I'm trying to say, my dear, is we are also at fault. We cannot just keep blaming the world for emitting carbon, having a huge carbon imprint. We are culprits ourselves. We are very callous people.
So for that we need to
good policies,
disaster-resilient infrastructure in place.
Absolutely.
Right. So Dr. Sultan, what's your take on this? You've heard Dr. Yamin saying that it's not only the problem of the international community, but we are equally responsible. We haven't learned the lessons from the past, especially from the 2010 deluge.
Are you talking to me, Jawad?
Dr. Sultan, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think I agree to this. We are still talking about how much the foreign countries will give or donate or roll over the debt, but are we going to resolve this problem through this? Mitigation, Pakistan doesn't have the resources. Pakistan cannot do because we are not the major emitters. We have to work on adaptation. So if we have to work on adaptation, we have to put our governance structure in order. We have to put our institutions in order, because there have been enough studies post 2010 and 12 years had passed. We did nothing and we waited for another disaster. Unfortunately, the cycle is going to increase. So it was 12 years. Unfortunately, we can expect that next flood would be much earlier, because that's what the global pattern is. So till how much time we can continue to expect that the foreign countries will pardon our debt, roll over our debt, or provide money? That's not going to solve your problem.
Right, Dr. Sultan, here is a scenario, here is a case. Let's suppose Pakistan is able to put in the disaster resilient infrastructure in place, especially in those flood affected areas this time around during the phase of the rehabilitation. Next time we are hit by the record monsoon downpours, do you think that disaster resilient infrastructure is actually going to stand?
I think we have already crossed the point of no return. We can limit the damage, but we cannot completely guarantee that the next flood will not cause that kind of havoc. And what we are not looking at, it's just the initial loss that we are looking at. The problems that are going to come after this, the food insecurity, illiteracy, child marriages, violence and extremism, those are the issues that will come, because 33 million people have been displaced. They are climate migrants. We have to treat them, and we have to plan for their rehabilitation in the next, and it might take a decade or so, because 33 million is a huge number. And what we are looking at, maybe if we can put some more NDMA kind of an organization, maybe next floods would be handled better. I don't think so. We still understand what kind of disaster has hit us and what kind of disasters are likely to be hit in the next couple of years. Because this is, like you said, we all agree, this is not Pakistan's problem. But Pakistan does not have the influence to stop those biggest polluters. We can continue to raise voice. We can only do that if we are clear about what has happened in Pakistan and how do we adapt to this, and while fighting with the rest of the world and raising awareness, creating awareness amongst our own people also. And
Dr. Sultan, that is exactly the equation. The industrialized world emits carbon, greenhouse gases. A developed country like Pakistan is directly affected. And then we talk about the internal problems because there is flimsy infrastructure, the disaster resilient infrastructure is not there, and we haven't learned the lessons. Now, they do a mistake, we bear the brunt, and for building the disaster resilient infrastructure, we need, of course, the capital. So it should be in the form of reparations from those because of the mistake that we are bearing the brunt of.
I agree. We should ask and demand reparations. We should continue to raise voice at the international level. And one way of doing it is that we are not alone in this mess. There are many countries in Global South, developing countries. There are many in the developed world who listen to these things. So what we have to do is first put your own house in order so that we are prepared for the next flood. One. Secondly, you approach these countries, form a coalition and tell them, this time it is Pakistan, next could be you. So if this is going to be the future of the world, you need to raise this awareness, and you cannot do it alone. Pakistan has limitations. We are not a global power.
Right, Dr. Sultan, your point is well taken. Unfortunately, we are short of time. Let's go to Mr. Saqib. Mr. Saqib, what's your take on this, about this equation, the scenario that I've just discussed earlier?
Panelists on a few points. But I was just wondering that you should not start digging a well when you feel thirst or when you are thirsty. This is not the time to talk about the governance issues, the pitfalls in our policies, and the corruption and all that. If you ask any of your panelists, they are very much capable of enumerating at least 20 problems straight away relating to straight away governance. But this is not time for that. I think that they are right when they say that we need to, look at ourselves also. For instance, on the 13th or the 12th of August, we suddenly realized that 14th of August is coming. We know that the monsoon has to come. We know that we have to have infrastructure. We know that this calamity is coming. It is not something out of the blue. But unfortunately, we are not able to actually comprehend the issues, the problems facing the population as such. What have we done on the population problem? What about education? Equal education to all. So there are a number of issues. Right now, the need of the hour is that not only we expect from international community, but also we have to go to the drawing board and see how do we deal with this crisis? First, the crisis management, and then the conflict resolution. Then we have to be actually serious about it. That let's do something about, long-term planning and implementation.
Right, very pertinently put. So, Dr. Yamin, your take on this. First, we need to deal with this catastrophe and then take this opportunity to look into the long term and build the capacity of the departments concerned, as you mentioned, the civil administrations, and also look into the other matters that we really need to improve upon.
Mr. Tehami, we have to do both things simultaneously. We have to have policies of how to prevent such kind of disasters in the future. How can we build structures? Meanwhile, we have a huge work to do to deal with disease, waterborne disease, which we have to look after people who are going hungry. We are at the verge of a drought. People who used to eat one loaf of bread a day now are down to perhaps a crumb of bread. People do not know whether which children to feed. I think
baby food. Prime Minister has urged to provide baby food in those flood-affected areas.
Right.
So
I think Biden said that people do not know which child to feed and which child not to feed. So it's a very bad situation. We cannot start praising ourselves. It's a very bad situation. We have to deal with this disaster on an emergent basis. It's a national emergency. I don't see that kind of worry in Pakistan. No, people are sitting, collecting funds for the disaster, flood-affected people, but the kind of emergency that should have been created, I don't see that. We are in the midst of a political turmoil which is uncalled for. This is the time to get united and work for the people.
That's exactly what the government authorities have been saying, that it's time to get united at this time of trial.
Government is saying
so
that
let's do the politics sometime, some
absolutely,
other time.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, but we cannot say, let's wait for this disaster to be over and then we look into power. Oh, no, sir, we cannot. We have to work 24/7 on both fronts.
Last thing.
Right, Dr. Sultan, please very briefly and quickly, should we be looking just into this disaster and first deal with it and talk about our weaknesses later on after we are done dealing with this?
Look, we can only deal with this if we know that there are problems in it. But if we are going to overlook this problem, that we are doing a very good job, I don't think so. We are going to do anything for these people who are suffering. And I would agree with Dr. Tughral also. You look around in Islamabad, in big cities, the cities which have not been affected, the people which have not been affected. Apart from donations and a little bit of these slogans, what are we seriously doing about it? We are just talking about, and we are just talking about international community. How many of us do actually understand what's the climate disaster? It's an existential crisis. We are at the brink of our survival. If we want to survive, we have to realize our mistakes, the flaws in our system, and we have to rectify. While definitely we have to deal with the ongoing situation also. We cannot leave these people dying on the roads and in the flood-affected areas. We have to deal with those as a contingency. But
right.
we can only prepare ourselves for the future if we know there are problems.
Can I say something?
Right, Dr. Adil Sultan, beg your pardon for the interruption. Unfortunately, we're short of time. It was great having you on the show, Dean, Head of Department, Strategic Studies, Air University. We really appreciate your time. And we were joined in the studio by Dr. Tughral Yamin, Senior Analyst. It was great having you in the studio as well. And also on Skype from South Africa, we were joined by Mr. Najm Saqib, former ambassador. It was also great having you on the show. Thank you, all of you gentlemen, for your time on Views on News. You heard our panelists taking different lines regarding the international community's response to the Pakistan's disaster that it is faced with right now. Now, specifically when we talk about climate change, it is not the matter of Pakistan alone. It is an existential threat. It is a reality, existential threat for the entire humanity, for the entire planet. And the international community really needs to put in a strong foot in order to help Pakistan around, because if this time around it could be Pakistan, it could be some other country during the next summer or during the transition of the season. At the same time, Pakistan need to learn lessons, because our panelists were of the view, because after 2010 deluge, Pakistan didn't learn those lessons. We need to build capacity of our departments, the concerned departments, and we need to put in the disaster resilient infrastructure. With that note, we come to the end of today's show. Thank you for being with us. Until the next one, take very good care of yourselves.